10 years ago, the idea of gamers coming together, destroying enemies aplenty in a first-person shooter, and getting loads of loot in the form of guns, supplementary accessories, and or money seemed like a fresh idea. With a unique art style, incredible lowbrow humor to offset the fourth wall breaking moments, and stellar gameplay, the first Borderlands created a series that arguably made the looter-shooter subgenre of first-person shooters so popular, influencing plenty of games including its own sequels across 2 generations. Unfortunately, controversy has always been associated with Borderlands, mostly due to the over-the-top nature, but the lead-up to its third numbered entry had people talking about what was going on behind the scenes more than anything. The developers at Gearbox stayed steadfast and kept working on the most ambitious version of Borderlands yet with Borderlands 3. More guns, more flying guts, and more opportunities to tell sophomoric jokes seemed to be par of the course with another Borderlands game, getting this old Vault Hunter excited to see if they could maintain the incredibly fun gameplay loop that made its predecessor so fun, while adding to the growing lore this series has produced thus far. Just like its numbered predecessors, Borderlands 3 has everything a fan of the franchise would want, including multiple Vault Hunters with varying abilities to choose from, an extensive story featuring enemy variations aplenty, and so many unique guns. Taking control of the Beastmaster Flak, my goal was simple: finish the main campaign, complete some side missions to level up, and experience some of the more extensive and intense post-story action in Mayhem mode. My initial playthrough took nearly 40 hours to complete, with a variety of side missions left to finish, stronger enemies to conquer, and the intent of testing out the other Vault Hunter's abilities. The foundation of Borderlands gameplay has always been stellar, but in an arcadey, almost whimsical kind of way until now. Gunplay in Borderlands 3 feels tighter and more realistic, even with weapons that definitely don't exist in real life, including shotguns that charge up their slugs, or assault rifles that shoot rays of concentrated energy. Guns just don't have modes, they have specific manufacturers that usually have specific styles, meaning gamers who may not want rapid-fire weaponry may avoid certain weapons made by particular manufacturers. Elemental factors return in B3, with certain weapons being able to produce corrosive shots that will deteriorate more mechanical enemies, shock bullets perfect for depleting those pesky shields, and even the ability to freeze opponents. A great addition to certain guns is the ability to switch between firing modes. For example, some pistols or assault rifles can either go full auto or semi-auto by hitting down on the D-pad at any given moment. The same thing applies to weapons sporting 2 different elemental effects. This decision to have 2 firing modes is great, as it reduces the need to have a slew of the same weapons to have enough elemental effects in the player's inventory. Of course, a majority of the fun from playing a Borderlands game is the quality of guns given to the player. With so many incredible guns, it actually becomes tough to get rid of some of those that do so well early on, but eventually become useless as the enemies grow stronger. Enemies are a mixed bag. Like a majority of its predecessors, the game throws many enemies at one time to offset the rather bullet sponge AI. A majority of the lower-end adversaries are just as they were in the previous entries, and rarely leave a lasting impression, other than the loot they drop. A majority of 3's bosses won't go down as the best, mostly thanks to a lack of ingenuity, sporting large health bars, unblockable attacks, and spawning minions that become like gnats when the player is trying to focus. There are some very interesting ideas for bosses, like Pain and Terror's Agonizer 9000, but those encounters are usually insanely rare. The Vault Hunters themselves are definitely unique compared to their predecessors, including a robot who can control certain animals to fight by his side, like an acid-spitting skag, a girl who can summon and ride a customizable mecha bear, and even a siren with the ability to spawn multiple arms that will both crush and choke opponents. Thanks to a pretty extensive skill tree spread across 3 subcategories and featuring multiple branches, players will have differing builds Jumping in and out of co-op returns, and as expected, mostly works fantastically. Though there may be a moment or two where connections drop, or players get stuck, a majority of the time playing with someone both locally and online is easily accessible and rewarding, because enemies come out more en masse depending on how many players are working together, producing more rare loot to offset the difficulty boost. Players can choose between sharing levels and loot, or disabling shared levels with loot becoming first come, first serve. From a narrative standpoint, Borderlands 3 is easily the most extensive, with the lore from previous entries taking precedent over simply trying to open a grand vault, instead of focusing on the sociopathic actions of a charismatic man corrupted by power like Handsome Jack. Lilith, from the original Borderlands, takes the Crimson Raiders across various planets in an effort to stop the homicidal Calypso twins, Tyreen and Troy, from opening the legendary Great Vault. The twins' personalities and technical capabilities in regards to streaming gives way to the crazies around the universe to praise, kill, and die for them, while giving birth to the children of the Vault cult. While the irony of gamers trying to kill a pair of streamers while potentially streaming the game themselves isn't lost on anyone, the Calypsos lack that certain je ne sais quoi that made Handsome Jack so intriguing, instead opting to be living memes. Thankfully, a majority of the side characters returned from the previous entries, including the Telltale Games' spin-off. There's too an emphasis on relationships between characters that were only alluded to or barely touched on. Of course, Borderlands 3 has a ton of funny moments, right down to the boss descriptions, but it won't feel as revolutionary as it did in 2009. The worlds themselves are varied, with Pandora being more reminiscent to its Borderlands version, while unique locales such as Athena's and Promethea feature more corridors and spacey urbanized areas respectively. The implementation of fast travel in this version must be commended, as the player can fast travel almost at any time, as long as they're not in a vehicle. Catch a Ride also returns, with the driving being just like it was in the previous entries, with the player having to move the camera to turn any vehicle, while pressing up or down on the movement controller to go forward or reverse. It still doesn't feel natural no matter how much someone plays. Beyond the New Game Plus that makes enemies harder, the Proving Grounds Horde mode for co-op play, and a plethora of side missions is Mayhem mode, a post-campaign addition to make enemies tougher, with rarer loot becoming more plentiful, with its own skill tree to complement the action and extra experience points. All the while, the game has a wonderful soundtrack. Unfortunately, it's the little things that hurts the overall enjoyment, including a very limited backpack, bank, and lost loot container, where storage space additions are priced exorbitantly, especially early in the game. Frame rate drops can happen during anything from traversing the world, being in the middle of a firefight, or most obviously when pulling up and scrolling through the in-game menu. Technical issues like disappearing or stuck enemies can happen a lot, as do graphical problems, such as weapon descriptions getting stuck on the screen. And there's even a particular boss that is overpowered unless the player quits the main menu and reloads their save. One of the game's biggest early problems were cloud saves getting deleted randomly, so you had to be very, very careful. Even with its narrative flaws, performance issues, and lacking enemies, the incredible gameplay, rewarding loot, genuinely hilarious moments, and an amazing soundtrack definitely makes this one of, if not the best, Borderlands experiences. More than likely, if you've enjoyed the previous Borderlands games, you've probably already started playing or plan to play 3 in the near future. But what about those who are on the fence, or are simply burned out on the genre? This entry won't change anyone's perception, especially with a lacking story and not too much innovation to its name. But the gameplay is so much fun, with or without a friend. No matter what side of the fence you fall on, know that your butt may be the difference between life and death in space.
Come and hear the story of how my ass saved the entire ship! There I was, surrounded by total nimrods who who couldn't tell you the difference between an implosion drive and a sun-baked egg salad sandwich. Be careful, I said. This is high-tech stuff. But no, they wouldn't listen to me. They just took off. No regard for safety protocols. Now the whole ship is tearing itself apart. Lilith says, oh no, we got a hull breach. That's when I made a decision even the Firehawk herself couldn't make. I chose to throw myself into danger rather than risk the lives of my friends and crewmates. And I plugged the hole with my own ass.
Wow. It's like being in the presence of a real-life legend.